All right, this is Jacob Stoops. I'm here with Joanna Galysh, Amazon strategist at Marketplace Strategy. Joanna, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jake?
Doing awesome. Thank you for coming on. And for those of you that don't know, Joanna and I actually worked together, like a few of my other guests, at a previous agency. I'm not going to name it. Look at my LinkedIn profile. We've worked together for quite a while, and Joanna is a really awesome SEO strategist and has a background in content, and something that I find even more fascinating is getting into the world of Amazon SEO. So definitely something I hope to cover today. So Joanna, tell me, phase one. Oh, there's your cat.
You making the video too. Sorry.
No, it's okay. No worries. Making an appearance. That's funny. So the life. So as best you can, with your cat distracting you, describe. Tell me about your background. Tell me how you got into the industry. Tell me how you got to your current place, and kind of give me the synopsis of how you got into SEO.
Sure thing. That's a great question, and it's really kind of funny how it came about because when I was in school and everything, I feel like SEO and PPC and terms like that were kind of thrown around, but I graduated in 2013, so things like that still weren't really incorporated into like general marketing curriculum that much. I specifically was studying strategic communication in addition to marketing, so it definitely wasn't on my radar a ton, but I do recall having a specific marketing class with this one professor, and I really trusted him, really liked him a lot. It was like my junior year of college, and went to his office hours, and I was like, hey, I'm going to go to the career fair. Can you put some companies on my radar that, you've seen your students have success at, or that you've heard good things about, blah, blah, blah. So we were chatting, and, one of the companies that he mentioned was, the company that you and I had, ended up eventually working at together, Jake. And so, ended up going up to them at the career fair. And at that point, they were like, well, what are your strengths and things like that. And I have always been one of those kind of nerds who definitely has that English history background. It's always been my forte. I knew that I really enjoyed writing. So I spoke with my professor. He recommended a few companies to chat with at career fair. So researched them a bit. One of them was in my hometown, which was great. I was like, okay, cool. So went up to them at the career fair. Definitely knew that my strengths and skill set were more so in the like writing and history area. Wanted to really try to do something that combined writing with marketing if possible. So went up to them, gave the recruiter my resume. She looked at it for about half a second, and she was like, oh my goodness, you're from, this hometown. And it turns out she was from the exact same place as me, but she was just a little bit older than me. So we had never known each other in school or anything like that. But so we just totally hit it off. And from that point forward, she basically offered me kind of a more specific internship in terms of, not like, SEO in general and learning the basics, but with a bit more of that content spin. So that was where I ended up meeting, Maggie Barr, like one of your other guests, and as well as many of the other colleagues that we've met. So interned there. Absolutely loved it. Really liked getting to learn about SEO. I felt like it was kind of the perfect merging of all my different interests that I'd had. And so then after the internship was given a full-time offer, so kind of sailed through that senior year of school with the offer in my pocket, which was very, very nice. And then came back and started my career full-time in SEO. So that was sort of, how I ended up where I did. Initially, when I had come back, there was sort of a more separate content team thing that was going on, but I would say within a year or less that was kind of dissolved, and we were kind of just more so moved in with the broader SEO strategist, which I think was definitely a very good move in terms of just my learnings and career in general.
Yeah, that is something Maggie and I had talked about, with the idea of there was an SEO strategist career track and a content strategist career track, and at a certain point, just because writing is writing, that career track sort of and ended, right? And there was a certain point in which the folks, unfortunately, in that career track had peaked. And some of them loved writing and wanted to continue to do it, and that's fine. But the problem was the expectation of continuing to advance from a career perspective without moving over into the kind of the strategist genre. So a lot of the folks that were on the content path moved over, and honestly, it was after I think a few kinks and a bit of a learning curve, moved over into the strategist roles pretty nicely. So that was something that I know I was a part of and really pushing for, and something that I'm glad to have seen happen, because I never like to see people get kind of bottlenecked from a career standpoint or feel like they've peaked. So that was definitely something that stuck with me.
Absolutely.
So what was it like at the beginning of your career? Just like how are you feeling? What type of work was being thrown at you? And I guess I'm trying to put this in the perspective of somebody in 2018 starting. Like, what types of things did you go through? And if I'm a newbie to SEO, what types of things should I expect to go through?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in general, and maybe part of this was kind of just, entering into a little bit of a larger agency life for an initial career. But I will say at first, I would say maybe for the first few years, I did kind of feel like a very small fish in a very large pond. Definitely kind of, I would say maybe even a bit like idolized a lot of the people who were in more senior roles. I felt that everyone seemed like geniuses and gods, and that they knew everything about, Google and SEO. And of course, that was kind of dispelled the further along that I got in my career. And I realized, I can just use Google and be just as smart as them. I would say initially, though, a lot of the work, particularly while I was kind of a little more in that content track too, was kind of basic optimizations. So just going through and, checking out title tags, meta descriptions, a lot of times just focusing in on the character count, and, the best optimizations that we can get. So just kind of a lot of those typical on-page optimizations. I would say that initially my knowledge of technical and offsite was pretty limited. I did start getting a few more projects with offsite, and that was kind of still while link building was kind of a thing. So, doing a little bit of that as well. And then I would say eventually, once we got kind of rolled off of that content specific track, I started kind of dipping my toes into the technical front a little bit more. And Jake, the trainings that you did with the team really helped me to learn and grow a lot with that, as well as a few specific that I requested the people and felt very comfortable with the people who were leading the accounts, and I think they felt comfortable with me, so they were willing to give me a few more of those kind of reach assignments, if you will. And I think that was how I started kind of growing into the technical background and learning how to use a lot of those third-party tools and running audits and tracking keywords in Bright Edge and Conductor and just all sorts of things like that are very commonplace. But I think that starting out at a larger agency, a lot of times those tasks kind of fell to certain people on accounts who'd just always been doing them. So it was a bit of a breakthrough, I think, to finally begin to, do a lot of those things that, nowadays just seem like secondhand nature for most people who are in any sort of an SEO career, whether you're entry level or not.
So you mentioned something interesting. You mentioned reach assignments. And I feel like, within agency world, less so in-house, but within agency world, when you're trying to plan out who does let's say you win a piece of business and trying to figure out, all right, who's going to do this work, who's available, who's the best fit. One of the challenges is kind of like the chicken or the egg. On one side, you want to give people the opportunity to grow. On the other side, you want to make sure that you're fulfilling the needs of the account and making sure that you're putting, this is probably not the right word, but it's the word that's coming in my mind, competent people that for sure can do the job. And in the middle somewhere is the reach assignment, giving somebody an opportunity to learn on the job and to show that they can do more. how important was that for your development?
Honestly, I would say that that was huge. I can even think back to some like very specific assignments that I did. There were some where we were kind of trying to build out like a content hub. So I was in charge of, doing a lot of the, keyword research, identifying, topics for those, what kind of sites could we, link these articles from, like all that kind of stuff. And, just kind of having that sense of you being the owner of the project, even if there's still oversight, that for me, I think was huge and was really something that helped me to build my confidence. And I think another thing too that I tried to do, when I interned, but then also tried to kind of continue doing so as a full-time employee as well, was just sort of exposing myself to senior leadership or people who were a little bit higher up that I normally wouldn't, just because maybe they were doing thought leadership or come on.
We have a cat sighting.
Apologies about
That's okay.
that. So I would try to kind of get myself doing assignments. Even I remember one was honestly just compiling lists of upcoming conferences or awards, and I would meet with some higher up people to review that like once a month. And I think things like that just were really helpful to me. Number one, to get out of my comfort zone, because I had kind of in school, I was kind of that person who, I was like, keep your head down at your desk, do good work, and eventually either, you'll get noticed or you'll get the good grades or whatever's going to come your way from that. And I quickly learned that in the working world, that's not how things happen. So I think that for anyone who's a little bit, newer in their career, just doing things like that was huge. I think also too, something that I caught on to very quickly was that, in a field like SEO where everything's changing every single day, to me, just making sure that I was staying up to date with all of those, just different like knowledge, anything knowledge related and thought learning, like always making sure I was getting email updates. If I saw something that seemed cool that I didn't think anyone, else on my team had seen yet, I was always very quick to like shoot stuff like that out. So I think just anything to try to help you stand out in terms of your peers, just it not only helps your confidence, but it helps people feel more comfortable in coming to you and using you as that resource.
Yeah, absolutely. That, and it's funny. You answered the question I wrote down. Make people notice you, because you're right. When your head's down, that's great. And certain people like when people can be heads down and just focused on getting work done and not worrying about the drama of the workplace or the politics of the workplace. But when it comes to your career path, and this goes, I think, with any profession, the folks above you, I think there can be an assumption that if I keep my head down and I don't ever raise my hand, somebody someday is going to come and magically and promote me. And I know I came to learn that you have to balance it. And I hate to say that the squeaky wheel gets the grease doesn't pay off, but it does. You have to let people know, both in the sense of, hey, I'm interested in a promotion, or I'm interested in that opportunity, or I'm interested in this reach assignment. I'd like to learn more about this, in order to, like, honestly, you have to raise your hand. Otherwise people won't know what they don't know when it comes to, if you're trying to get your manager to notice you or to give you another opportunity. Maybe they don't know that you want X, Y, or Z. So I think that figuring out a way to balance the keep your head down, stay out of the politics, do good work, with being a squeaky wheel from time to time is not a bad thing, and good for your career ultimately. But then you also want to balance that with, don't be a squeaky wheel all the time, right? Don't be going into your boss's office every other day, complaining or whatnot, or saying, why didn't I get this promotion, or this drama going around the office, or whatever, right? So definitely I was going to ask you that question. So anyways.
Yeah, and I think for me too, one of the things that I learned was, not even just about being a squeaky wheel, but for me, the main things that I would try to think about, not just in terms of like, how do I get promoted, but just in my everyday work life was, number one, how do I make myself a valuable team member? And then number two, how do I make other people's jobs around me easier, especially of the people that I'm reporting to and that are higher up. So like I said, initially, I started with really small menial stuff like compiling Excel documents of conferences. But eventually, by the end of my time at my first job, I was, managing our agency's relationship with Conductor. I eventually was, running our team meetings across the nation for our SEO team. So I think it's just kind of doing things that not even necessarily are, you're, going to your boss's office saying, oh, hey, I did X, Y, Z, but it's more so you're going in there and saying, hey, I noticed you have a lot on your plate. Like, what's some stuff that I can take off for you? Or, hey, do you need help? I can send out this meeting invite. I'll make a deck for this. Just kind of stuff like that, I think, is the hugely helpful stuff. And I think they always say that it's more about, people will remember how you make them feel instead of what you're doing or what you're saying. So if your boss remembers you as someone who goes in there and they're like, wow, like that person was so helpful, like they're going to think about you positively. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to kind of influence your career in the best way possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You never want somebody to think of you as that asshole that made my life harder. So how did you get to marketplace strategy? Where did they come in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually one of our co-founders, Sam, just honest to goodness, found me on LinkedIn. And at the time when he reached out, I was looking, but I kind of just felt that everything that I had been seeing, either on LinkedIn or other job sites, it just felt old and stale. It was places I'd heard of. It's a lot of times places I hadn't heard the best things about, just nothing that I truly felt excited about. And then when Sam's note ended up in my inbox, I was like, marketplace strategy, what is that? Like, it was so unusual for me. And, I Googled it immediately. So I was like, oh, there's no way, like, this has got to be in like LA or New York or something. And when I found out it was in Cleveland, I was, pretty shocked. And I was like, I thought I knew the agency scene here, why haven't I heard of these people? And so, just went into, had a phone interview with him, literally lasted over an hour. We were kind of just like shooting the shit. It was great. I honestly felt like I was talking to someone like you, Jake, that I had known for a while and who was just like a seasoned professional, and then just really felt comfortable not only meeting him and the other co-founders, but the rest of the team as well. And I was very, very hesitant to leave where we had worked together just because everyone there just were great people and everyone felt like a family. But it was kind of a relief to see that, even though I hadn't known these people for 5+ years, I could still go somewhere else and, make new friends and everything would be okay and that I could find other good coworkers. And I think that eventually that was what kind of helped me be able to make that decision and feel comfortable and confident about it. But yeah, so, at the end of the day, Sam was, just founding me on LinkedIn, just in terms of my profile. And so that was kind of how they grabbed me that way. But at that point, that was in March of 2018. And since then, I believe I was like the 15th hire, and I think we're up to 22 now. And possibly going to double this year. The growth is going to be huge. There's just so much demand for, help on Amazon and other third-party marketplaces right now.
So the funny thing is, and it's weird, but even in this day and age, they still don't teach SEO, like proper SEO in college. So to some people, SEO still seems new. Now, take those people who think that SEO is relatively new. Now, it's been around for 20 years, but to those people, the even newer form of SEO, and maybe why you hadn't heard of this place, is because Amazon is who we as SEOs often compete with in Google search results, and everybody always thinks SEO, Google, Google, Google. Well, Amazon has become such a juggernaut that people are now optimizing the results in Amazon. It's its own search engine, right? So that's a newer form of SEO, and I foresee this continuing to splinter off with other brands that sell things. Eventually, people will be. It won't just be an Amazon SEO. Maybe it'll be a Wayfair or whatever. I can't think of another brand off the top of my head, but it will splinter off, and people won't just be optimizing for Google and Bing anymore. It will be, hey, Google and Bing's important, but you need to optimize my Amazon feed. You need to do whatever. So it's really, I find it fascinating, the rise of Amazon SEO as a career option now. So tell me what it's like. What is it like working for, what does Marketplace Strategy do? What is it like working for them? What do you do day to day? How do you optimize for Amazon?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think for me, something that's been kind of an interesting shift is that I feel like in my old job, I was playing a good mix of, kind of doing the, heads down SEO work, and at this job and doing project management. And this job has been maybe a little bit more on the project management focus, but I feel like I've become a subject matter expert on a lot more diverse subjects. So whereas at my former job, it was like just SEO, I feel like now I've gotten a broader reach to kind of learn more about advertising and technical and just other elements like that. Not that I wasn't aware of those before, but I feel like I've gotten a lot more in depth with those, which is pretty cool. But relating specifically to optimizing and kind of my day to day, lots of client emails, just like anyone else's job. But I think what for me was so different about Amazon was that, with Google, it's a little bit more predictable. I think we're just all more used to it. And I think with Amazon, their platforms and algorithm are just so much less sophisticated. I would say probably at least 5 years or so behind Google, if not more. And then if you can imagine that every other third party that's out there, so like the Walmarts, the Home Depots, the Wayfair, stuff like that, are even less sophisticated than Amazon.
That's great. I should have said Walmart. They're a giant competitor. Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
So what's been interesting about that too is just learning about, how do we best go about optimizing on Amazon? What are the different levers that we can pull? And with Amazon, what's interesting is your number one ranking factor is going to be sales velocity. So obviously on Google, we don't have that, right?
Right.
So with Amazon, that's the most important thing. And that's also influenced by some things that we can control and then other things that are more indirect that we can't control. But, from a marketing perspective, we can try to help that out through things like optimizing the product images, the enhanced brand content or A+ content, going through and optimizing the titles, bullets, and descriptions. And what's interesting as well about Amazon is, so not only are there kind of two different fulfillment methods, well, there's many fulfillment methods, but in terms of platforms of, ways that you can sell your products to the end consumer. So you can either be a first party, and they have a separate platform for that called Vendor Central, and they have a third party platform called Seller Central. So for me, it was a huge learning curve to, kind of take all the skills that I had from my previous position and then learn how to master that within these platforms, and knowing that, they weren't as sophisticated as Google. And so thinking about what did I need to be doing to make sure that, my clients' optimizations were successful and that we were using, the SEO type optimizations in conjunction with advertising to kind of create that flywheel effect, if you will, and get more eyes to our clients' product detail pages. So for example, with Amazon, on Google, how, you definitely want your keyword in the title tag to, to help rank. Amazon doesn't really matter as much where you put things. If you mention it in your on-page copy, you don't really necessarily have to double dip and then mention it again. They have back-end keywords that are available through their platforms. Don't really need to do that. So it's just kind of interesting, and I'm sure that it will over time get more, update more and get more sophisticated, and there'll be a lot more nuances that we have to remember. But at this point in time, it's more what for me has been interesting is kind of learning what differentiates the first-party platform from the third-party platform, knowing the data that I'm able to get from each of those platforms depending on my clients' reporting levels that they have within Amazon, and then using that to just make sure that we're going about, optimizing our products in the, most, what's the word I'm looking for? Just in the best way possible, prioritize them properly.
So if I'm a consumer and I'm going to a marketplace, Amazon, I'm assuming there are other sites outside of Amazon that you work on as well, but how can I tell if I'm a consumer, or can you tell if something's been optimized?
I would say in general, it tends to be pretty obvious. You can kind of tell. So what's interesting to keep in mind with Amazon is that, while optimizing the text is important, 90% of people will look at every single image on a product detail page, and the amount of people who actually go through and read the text is much, much lower than that, as I'm sure you can imagine. So, and unfortunately, Amazon is very guarded with their data, and they don't really like to give us too much. But based on all the studies that that we can see, the main emphasis that we do want to place is on those product images, specifically the main image. So that's that first image that you'll see, product on a white background. That's what's going to come up in the search results, especially in a category like grocery. So yeah, we've been trying to just kind of play around with, how do we make our clients' product images stand out, especially in different categories like grocery, for example. And you might have even seen this in your own personal searching. So like, let's say you're searching for coffee, like K-Cups. So when you're searching, a lot of times for some of our clients in that space, we've been putting like extra little text blurbs within the main image. They kind of, Amazon's not always thrilled about it. Sometimes they might reject it, but, so we might say like 25 pack, or we might say the flavor like on the side of the image vertically. So that way it just makes it stand out when every other image that you're seeing in a listing might just be the product on a white background. And you have to actually click through sometimes to see what that flavor is or what's the pack size.
And that's, is that flat text on the image?
I believe so. I'm not 100% on that, though.
People do that on YouTube now. I mean, like most people have, the visible text over top of the thumbnail. That's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of doing, doing little things like that. And then, I would say just from a consumer perspective, I think that just you and your personal shopping, looking at different listings, like it's probably pretty easy for you to tell in most cases if something's been optimized or not. If the title kind of follows a more specific format and it has some extra detail, includes things like features and benefits, what the size is, then most likely that title has been optimized. Typically for bullet points, a format that we tend to recommend for most clients is, starting out with all caps, just to kind of call out some of those, main features or important things about your product, and then having, the additional description in title case, or in sentence case or following that. And then, the product description is kind of where we put a lot more of that, like the meat, if you will. So especially on a lot more technical products. I have a client who sells landscape lighting. So we have to, go through things about like different voltage or what transformer might you need with this, or, things like that. A lot of times we'll provide that kind of information in a product description, because if a person is taking all that time to scroll all the way down there, then they definitely want to read that. So I think that just kind of, from your own shopping, in browsing, you can definitely tell, especially a lot of those listings that are third-party listings. It's like, not ships and sold by Amazon, but ships and sold by like XYZ company, arriving in like 3 to 4 weeks. It's probably coming from China. A lot of times those listings definitely aren't as optimized, and they might just have a couple bullets with some very abbreviated text and likely only one product image.
So how important are reviews?
Reviews are huge on Amazon because they really help contribute to that sales velocity. And it's just because thinking back to that consumer mindset, that's what a consumer wants. Like when you're shopping for yourself, I'm sure if you saw a product that was like about the same price as another, but like one had 1 review and it was like 3 stars, and another had like 250 reviews and it was like 4.5 stars. Even if it's maybe like $1 or $2 different, you're probably going to buy that product that has like 250 reviews, because it just makes the seller seem more credible, makes the product itself seem more credible. And so I would say, I think from Amazon's perspective, depending on which platform a client is using to sell their products to Amazon, we have some different options where if a product is new or has like less than 5 reviews or things like that, we can try to help them out. And there's some ways where Amazon sometimes offers incentives for people to review and then, bills the client. There's through the first party platform, there's some more expensive programs that can be used. There's some other things we can do to kind of automate emails to send out. to people who, have purchased the product or, who are kind of on your email list, things like that, which are helpful. But I would say in general, though, like the reviews are huge. And I can't remember I don't know if this is something that's for sure, but from kind of what we've gleaned from Amazon is that I think typically for a product to, what they're looking for in terms of reviews is I think they want you to be at like about at least 30 reviews. But I would say like those are probably your most critical, but definitely like if you can get like at least 5, that's really key.
How do you do your research on the platform? Like, it's an SEO, right? We're always doing research, keyword research, competitive research. Does that exist within the platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. So honestly, a lot of times, just by doing things like simple product searches, seeing who else is coming up for a lot of those, main terms that you want to be targeting for your own products. Within the advertising platform, what's kind of cool is that we're able to, we can serve up some competitive ads and, target specific products with those, which is really neat. But I would say in terms of just like general SEO, keyword research type stuff, Amazon really is not the greatest for providing us data. We tend to use a lot of third-party tools to help us with that. There's one called Jungle Scout that can help us essentially scrape the SERPs within Amazon and pull things out. They also have a keyword research tool that we use as well. I'm blanking right now on some other third-party tools that we use, but there definitely are a lot of good ways to kind of quantify those numbers on Amazon. It's just unfortunately a lot of times not directly through the Amazon platform. But yeah, so, and like I said, just kind of going back to that, doing your own product research, just kind of searching those keywords. I would, be looking at your competitors' listings. We do that a lot. We look at our reviews. We compare to competitors' reviews. We try to see, other things that are maybe lacking in their product that ours offers. Are there things that people are complaining about with our products that we can try to better identify within the content? And will that maybe help us rank better, things like that? Like maybe people are using a product for a totally different intent than what the product was actually made for, but can we try to incorporate that and, boost our sales and, ultimately our rankings and search volume?
So let's move away from Amazon for a second. So for you, what would you say have been both your biggest successes and your biggest failures, regrets, funny stories, oh shit moments within the industry?
That's a really good question. So in terms of successes, a lot of times, not that I don't want to say I didn't work for things, but I feel like a lot of times it was just sort of circumstances and things kind of just fell in my lap. So at the former agency that I was at, there was kind of a bit of a mass exodus, for lack of a better term. And so a lot of senior leadership and even, not necessarily just senior leaders, but a lot of people within my team that I worked with and relied on a day-to-day basis, within a matter of a few months had kind of all left. And so that sort of left myself and a few others who, had maybe been there for like 4 years or so as some of the most seasoned people on the team, at least in that specific office. And so suddenly we were kind of inundated with a lot more responsibility. So I was kind of able to step up and take on the management of honestly one of the largest accounts for the agency in North America in terms of SEO. So that was definitely a really huge opportunity. Definitely learned a lot through that. There were a lot of ups and downs. Worked with an internal team that was completely across the country and who operated very, very differently. So that was definitely a huge challenge. My approach has always been to I like to be transparent with clients, be pretty honest and open, and that team kind of was more so just trying to, not always maybe being as upfront as I felt that they should have been, sweeping some things under the rug, didn't always want to give us FaceTime with the client or, face or phone time with the client. And, if something had happened on like maybe let's say like a technical end or something like that, maybe erased a site functionality or erased optimizations we had made or, something like that, that there was no, there really wasn't a lot of responsibility being taken on the other team's end. And so that was something that, was very difficult for me to navigate, especially from, 3,000 miles away and really, only seeing the client maybe like once or twice a quarter and mostly speaking to them on the phone because, obviously you don't want to put your internal team under the bus, but at the same time, they're making, your life very, very difficult. So I think that for me, it was a success, but it was also just a huge learning opportunity as well. There was another client that I worked on where the client was stateside, and they were great, but they were owned by a parent company, and the parent company assigned SEO teams to all of their sub brands. So they technically had an SEO team that was in India, and so got to deal with a lot of fun, sexism issues there. There was myself and another female coworker on the team, and for a while it was just the two of us. And eventually another male came on the team, and it was just frustrating because she could say something, and then, I would kind of rephrase and say the same thing, and it was just silence or, confusion, and then the male coworker would repeat exactly what one of us had said, and it's like, oh, thank you, that's great, you're so helpful. So I think stuff like that was kind of frustrating, and I think that it made me realize just how important, clear documentation is, and, if you need to do like workflow trackers and things like that, just to, kind of keep, where's the responsibility of this task, who's owning this, just to help keep things clear, especially with kind of that language and cultural barrier. I think that for me was something that was, difficult to learn, but it was definitely very important.
Tell me about a failure.
So this is actually very embarrassing. And a few years ago, I probably never would have admitted this because I was mortified about it for a long time, but now it's been a while, so I'm just going to laugh about it. But when I first started, it was my first client on-site meeting, and I was just like so stressed about it. I had like stayed up most of the night trying to like prepare and pack and do all these things. And by the time we got there, I didn't even realize, but while we were sitting in this meeting, I guess I was kind of like doing the head bob, and I didn't know, and I was falling asleep in this meeting, but like being so tired that I didn't even realize that I was. And so that was just something that was absolutely horrific. And, I didn't realize it. Honestly, didn't even know until after the trip. My manager pulled me aside. Like, none of our internal team had, seen me or whatever, but the client had unfortunately noticed, and, they just kind of had a bit of a talk, and they were like, hey, like, what's going on? And I was like, honestly, I was just stressed, and I didn't really get enough sleep. Like, and, you're like fresh out of college, and you think you're invincible, and all of that. And so I think for me, that was super embarrassing and very humbling, and definitely not a mistake that I've ever made again. Definitely learned to, even if you got a few slides to finish, like, just go to bed, do it in the morning. It's absolutely not worth it. So.
Yeah, I find that there's a certain type of culture that exists, and it's very pervasive with startups, which is interesting because I just came from a startup where it's like the basically work. If you're not hustling, and I believe I read an article where somebody called it hustle porn, where it's like the fetishizing of the hustle, and if you're not working 80 hours a week, somebody's beating you. And I believe there are several studies that show like, hey, after 40 or 45 or 50, people's productivity drops dramatically. So like you may be working 30 extra hours or whatever that may be, but you're not nearly as effective as you are with a night of rest and 6 or 8 hours of sleep or whatever you require. So like for me, work-life balance is it's hugely important, not only because I've got a family life, but even when I didn't have kids or didn't have anything else going on, I always make it a point, even when I see other folks around me, and it's not to say that I don't want to work more hours, but I feel like it's very important for your brain and your own personal sanity to just completely unplug. I have a personal policy where like other people get like Slacks on their phone or email on their phone. I won't do that because when I'm away from work, my mind is away from work, and it's time to focus on me. And now when I'm at work, if I'm going to be working, and it's not like I'm working like 20 hours or 30 hours, right? I'm still doing my 40 to 50. When I'm at work, damn well better be efficient, right? If other people are working working a huge amount of hours, and those people do get recognized, especially around holiday time, because they're putting in that extra time. But for me, it's just never been beneficial, and I find that I burn out quite a bit, once I start kind of reaching that peak, or once I get to 5 or 6 in the evening, and it's time to like switch over to like, hey, this is personal time. But I definitely give the advice to people, like, you go on vacation, take your computer, but don't open it, right? Take your computer in case there's a fire, don't open it. Because it's just good for your mental health. And I think mental health is important, and sometimes in many industries, but I find that it's pervasive in SEO. Sometimes mental health suffers. Super important thing.
And I think too, just because our job is dealing with the internet, sometimes it is a little hard to disconnect, because so many of us, we're not just using the internet at work, but, we're using it at home too, in our personal space. And so I think that it kind of blurs those lines a bit. But have you, like, and maybe this is not appropriate, but like, have you felt pressured at either like your previous job or, current situation to be working more? Or is it kind of just like you're being productive and, people leave you alone type situation? Absolutely.
And I think over time, and I would say this is mostly pervasive in the agency world. And it was, I've been in-house twice, and I've been at agencies 3 times, right? But I would say 90% of my time has been with agencies. And that's something that once people have worked with me for a long enough time, they know that I'm a really efficient employee. But there definitely is pressure, whether it be pressure from above or pressure from your peers, because you see them working 50 or 60 or whatever, whatever the number of hours is. There's definitely an expectation that comes from above or from the side that, yes, you either need to put in those hours every week, or like, hey, there are certain times of year when you really need to suck it up and pull a 60-hour week, or pull multiple 60-hour weeks, or string that together. And doing that once in a while is okay with me. Doing it every week is not something that's sustainable for me, and I try to be a good team player, but there's definitely pressure. And in agency life, there's definitely an expectation that you should go above and beyond often. And I find that the place that I'm at now, it's not bad, and I love my boss, and he doesn't put that kind of pressure on me, right? It's a very chill environment. Other places, it's been an expectation that you spend half your year pulling 60-hour work weeks, and that's not great. Now I get it during the holidays, right? Especially if you have retail clients, it comes with the territory, but at a certain point, it's just unhealthy. So I try not to do it.
I agree. Yeah. I think that, for me, there have been definitely times where there's been that pressure and things like that. But I'm the same way, like on the weekends or, evenings, like if I need to log on and check things, I will. I'm happy to jump on and do that as needed. But like in terms of like putting like work stuff on my phone, I do have Slack, just because we use it very heavily at my current agency. But everyone's really great about, hey, unless there's something really pressing, like people don't want to bother you. They know that, you're a good employee and you're getting your stuff done. And maybe that's just a benefit of, me being at a smaller company now, and we all really know and trust each other and know that we have really strong work ethics. But I agree. Like I just went on a 5-day vacation back in December and didn't take my computer, didn't have email on my phone. I was like, hey, my clients can call me if they need to. And, I have Slack if my internal people need to reach me. But beyond that, like, hey, I'm getting paid to be off. And I know that when I return, me having that time just to get outside and not be looking at a screen is going to help me be a better and more productive employee when I get back. And I think that that's something that a lot of people just, feel like if they're not constantly checking in, that like they're not going to be as relevant, or that they're, missing out or whatever. But at the end of the day, like the business world's going to keep on turning. Like it's not like, Amazon's not going to stop selling products just because I go on a vacation. Google's not going to stop working because, you took a half day to go see your kids at school or whatever, So I think it's just kind of trying to figure out that balance.
So this section always runs long. Got two more questions. One I think is extremely personal, but it's honestly, it's the type of stuff that I'm really, really interested in exploring in relation to working at an agency. So, and feel free, you don't have to answer. So a couple of years ago, you went through a pretty significant personal loss with your dad. Mm-hmm. What was that like, going through that and coming to work at the same time?
To be completely blunt, it was horrible. And I can't imagine being someone in a situation where you had a loved one pass unexpectedly, because I'm sure that would be even more awful. In my situation, it was one of those things where it was kind of inevitable, but, obviously when it still happens, it's still awful. And I was at a point where I just, for a few months, I felt like my brain was in a fog every day. I would wake up and go to work and I felt like a zombie. And Jake, I know you were my career manager at that point, and I think I remember telling you at one point that I'm just trying to get through right now. I absolutely was very unlike myself and had no desire to, take on anything extra, because I was expending all of my energy just to physically be present at work, to be completely blunt. And so I think that that's something where, and I will say too that, where I was working at the time, they had a really great policy of hey, take the days you need, no one's going to question this, totally fine. And everyone was, very, very supportive, very, very kind. And, I think that, that's kind of, what I was going back to saying too, of, why I was so hesitant to leave that job, just because everyone, was so supportive of me. And I do still consider a lot of these, you and other people that I've met, you guys are great friends, even more like a little work family. And so I think that without that, I can't imagine being someone who, went to work and sat in a cube every day and didn't really talk to other people or have anyone to rely on. I think that would be very difficult. But, I think when you're going through that situation, you just have to keep reminding yourself that even if you're just showing up at work and answering some emails, at that point, it's not that you're trying to be a bad employee, but at that point, if that's the best you can do, then that's the best you can do. And also too, I would really encourage you just, to take your mental health very seriously. I was someone who I always felt like I never needed to talk to anyone, didn't need counseling. And, got to a certain point where I was I feel depressed all the time. I can't get out of bed. And that's never how I've acted. And so I definitely would recommend to, I explored the, the resources that the company provided in terms of, helping with some free sessions and things like that. And I would say just anything that your company wants you to be the best employee that you can be. And when you're going through something that's really difficult like that, they want to provide, those resources for you to kind of help you process and deal with those things. So I definitely recommend, reaching out to those hotlines, reaching out to your HR person saying, hey, I'm, dealing with this, resources that the company offer. And I think that that kind of stuff was hugely important in helping me kind of get myself back on track.
Absolutely. And what advice would you give, not to people going through it, but to the people around the people going through it? Because I feel like sometimes when there's a situation like that, it's almost hard to know what is the right thing. What is the person looking for from other people in terms of support? What can you do that is appropriate, but not over the top to make them feel even worse about it? It's kind of a weird and awkward situation for people around you. What would you, as somebody that went through this, recommend for the people around those people?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. And it probably does differ a little bit individually, but I think for me what was really important was just, you know that you're suffering and everyone else knows that you're suffering, but you still want people to, to treat you normally. So I think just, still making sure that you're, taking those people, hey, put a lunch on their calendar, ask them if they want to go on a walk, even just pull them aside for a casual, hey, I know we had XYZ meetings this week, whatever, but how are you doing with things? Are there things you're falling behind on? Can I help you? Is there anything you want to talk about? I think just kind of, making sure that, not that you wouldn't normally be checking in, but I think maybe just kind of increasing that a little bit, but then, kind of just in a general team setting, just still trying to, make sure you're cracking jokes, like you want to be laughing at something. So I feel like just treating the person as normally as you can, which I know is kind of a cliche and dumb answer, but really that's, kind of how it feels.
That's the answer. I've never gone through it, so I don't know. Biggest mentor, who has helped you out? Give a shout out to somebody.
That's so tough. I feel like there's quite a few. I would say definitely you have probably pushed me the most and helped shape my career the most. So thank you very much for all of that. I know that you, again, like you said, you got stuck dealing with me at a difficult time in my life for a little while.
For saying me.
Yeah,
but because I'm the host of the podcast, you can't pick me, so pick somebody else.
Yeah, so definitely, learned a lot from you and learned that, hey, like not everyone knows everything all the time, and it doesn't hurt to just Google something if you don't know the answer. And I think that for me was a huge learning curve, just because I felt like, people who were more senior than me just had this massive knowledge and just could pull out any answer at any time. And I realized like, okay, no, they're just looking stuff up sometimes too, just like I am. So I think that was, hugely helpful. But in terms of other mentors, definitely have to call out another of our former colleagues that you also interviewed, Maggie Barr. I think for me, just being like a young woman in the workplace, and I don't currently have any children, but, definitely kind of watched her go through the whole process of, going from someone who, who didn't have any kids to someone who had 3 kids and was still holding down a full-time job, and not only just holding it down, but being extraordinarily successful at it and taking on all sorts of, extracurricular things, not just at work, but in her personal life as well. And, just being like, wow, man, some days I can barely go home and like make a pot of mac and cheese. Like, how are you doing all this? And I think just kind of having those honest conversations of like, hey, like, it seems like on the outside sometimes that everyone has it all together, but that's not always the case. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And, but, most importantly, I think this kind of goes back to what you were saying too about just being productive and managing your time. When you're at work, you've got to be at work. And I think that was something for me, that was a little bit difficult when I first started, just because, like I said, you're on the internet, it's easy to get distracted. I'd find myself taking BuzzFeed quizzes and things like that I shouldn't have been doing. And obviously everyone needs like a brain break once in a while. It's totally understandable. But I think just, from her and kind of to navigating, those situations of, hey, like, you're seeing, a male colleague being treated a little bit differently than you. Like, how do you approach that? Or like, how does like so-and-so get away with these things? Like, is it just because, you know what I mean? They're getting this preferential treatment and stuff like that. So I think that she was very helpful to me in terms of just how do I go from kind of that like, oh, I'm just a content writer person to no, like I'm someone who's smart. I can be strategic. I know how to do my job. I just need you to kind of back off and like give me the reins and just, let me see how this goes. I'll reach out to you if I need assistance kind of thing. And just sort of how do I, be able to prove myself and just increase my visibility across not only clients, but the internal team as well. And I would say that, outside of you, like after you left the agency, she definitely was like my biggest champion and pushed me very, very hard. So
Maggie is awesome, right? Maggie, she was like, I feel like a bit of a mama bear for the team, and a super strong woman, mother of 3. Don't know how she does it. Don't know how she did it. And just like you said, awesome at her job, awesome at work. Awesome at home, and does everything the right way, and comes to work with a really great, or at least then, really great attitude. And she was a pleasure to work with. And you brought up a couple of things. Definitely, I do want to touch on them before we move to the next section. Is SEO? I feel like tends to be. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some female rock stars within the industry, but everywhere that I've been, especially from a leadership standpoint, it's been SEO leadership has been predominantly represented by males within the company, and I've always thought that was stupid. Stupid and wrong for a lot of reasons, and I don't know why, but females just seemingly were held, I don't know if held down is the right word, because I would hope that it wasn't intentional, but that's the way that it shook out. And I remember when we were at the other place, honestly, all of the managers, directors, and above, they were all men.
Mm-hmm.
How did that make you feel?
Honestly, like, especially when I was like a fresh college hire, even though I had, interned and at least had some level of familiarity with most of the people on the team, it was super intimidating. I really don't know how else to put it, because especially too, I think that where we had been, there was sort of this like toxic bro culture thing going on where, you could definitely tell that, people were being invited to like go to these lunches, or people would like hang out, or, you know what I mean? And like do these different, just the way that accounts were set up. I remember being on an account, probably like maybe like 2 or 3 years into my job. And at that point, I was still kind of, I don't even know if I was at a manager level yet at that point, or where I was at, but, just kind of, writing content and doing that, optimizations and things like that. And there was someone, one of those people on my team, and, it'd be time for a monthly report, and our project manager would say, hey, I need our report by like X day. And then we'd meet, and it'd be 2 days later, and she'd be like, hey, like, I asked you for this report. Where is it? Like, oh, it'll get done. And then I'd like see the person frantically like doing it 5 minutes before the client meeting. But then I would see them walking around the office all day, just like, playing basketball with other people and chatting people up and drinking and, doing stuff like that. And like, I just recall feeling very frustrated because I felt like I was sitting there all day, with my head down, doing my work, not getting recognized, because if like I said, small fish, very big pond, not getting recognized at that point, which that's fine. But then these other people, it seemed like were being praised, and not only just praised, but also promoted at like an insane rate, while most of the people that I saw actually sitting at their desks and doing hard work, and who I know were kind of driving the strategy, even if they weren't the ones necessarily maybe presenting the strategy to a client, were kind of just being swept aside. And to me, that was very disheartening, I will say. But like I said, eventually those people left, and then it kind of opened up room for the rest of us to kind of fill into those roles, maybe take on too much, as I think you would agree with me. But I think that, just kind of, thinking back on that, it was tough. Like I would say maybe there were like 1 or 2 women that I can think of who were in a leadership position. And there was one who, I did definitely look up to quite a bit, but the other one kind of just, and maybe it was a survival tactic, but she made herself kind of part of the boys club. And I felt just as intimidated by her as I did by, all the men who were in leadership. And I think it just, for me, like, I think what would have been awesome to have would just have been someone who I felt was maybe a little bit more approachable, that I could have gone and talked to. Like, it would have been cool for, women to, try to set up some sort of women's group or, something like that. But yeah, in general, I think that, SEO and a lot of like, tech fields, things like that, they do tend to be male dominated. I think that right now is probably the best it's ever been, and hopefully it's just going to keep getting better. But just a quick little plug, I have found an awesome group that I'm hoping to officially join soon called Women in Digital. If you're a woman and you do anything relating to like digital marketing at all, definitely check this group out. They're all across the country. They have awesome monthly sessions and meetups. You can kind of go and someone will present every month, and you can, they have an opportunity for people to share some issues that they might be going through in the workplace, and then everyone else can offer suggestions based on, what they have gone through. And, it doesn't always have to be things like, oh, well, this man got promoted and I didn't. It's just a huge variety of different, uphill battles that people are struggling with. And it's very eye-opening, and it's awesome. And it's a great way to connect with people in your community. So I would say that, if you're at a company where you don't maybe have that kind of leadership and you're lacking women in leadership, definitely check out Women in Digital.
Yes. And I feel like, who is the founder of that?
That's an excellent question. I can't recall.
So I'm looking at the website right now, and there's Elena Shearer, who's an amazing, amazing speaker, actually in Columbus, Ohio. I think there's a branch of this in Columbus, Ohio.
I do know that they do their conference in Columbus every year, so that makes sense.
Yes. So absolutely. And I believe I I just spoke at a conference, and I don't know why, but I'm blanking out on the name because I believe that the founder is actually the woman behind this, and I'm embarrassed that I'm forgetting the name now that I'm on the spot. But yes, definitely join Women in Digital. Huge presence in Columbus, but if you're not in Columbus, yeah. So let's move on. Got to make your bones. Got to drop a knowledge bomb. Not a violent knowledge bomb, but a knowledge bomb, so to speak. Tell us something that we don't know.
Tell you something that you don't know. That's a great question.
You work on Amazon. There's probably a lot of SEOs that don't know a thing about Amazon.
Yeah, I would say...
You don't have to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I sort of feel like I guess I've already talked about what I was going to say for this. So is it bad if I kind of like repeat a little bit, or do you want me to... Okay, so I think just like for me, something that I learned that like most people don't know is just that, so Amazon being behind the 8 ball or just not having as updated of like an algorithm and not being as updated as a platform as in general as something like a Google, I feel like there's definitely a lot of opportunity there, and there's a lot of growth that's happening very rapidly. And so not just on like the SEO side, but also on the advertising side, they just started offering a display program, just stuff that on Google seems basic, like, oh yeah, of course, but like a Walmart website just started offering advertising in 2018. I mean, it's kind of astounding when you think about it, right? About how could these companies just be so far behind? But for a while, just with Amazon kind of setting the pace, like I think it was sort of, if Amazon wasn't doing it, then it wasn't really on their radars either. And so I think just kind of, like in terms of knowledge bomb, just that with Google, I know that of course there's still people who are out there doing like black hat or spammy things, but I feel like in most instances, Google catches those people pretty quickly. But in the Amazon world, I feel like, unfortunately, there probably is, not that our agency operates in this way, but there is still a lot of, chances for that kind of stuff to fly under the radar just because it isn't quite as a sophisticated platform. And when you're dealing with Amazon support, so if you're dealing with like someone who's a vendor manager or different people, those people are typically based in the US, but their support people are based out of India, which probably isn't a surprise. So kind of the fate of your content uploads to Amazon, if you will, sort of rests in their hands. So if they're flagging your things and they're saying, oh, hey, like, this seems to talk about a promotion and, we can't have that in your A+ content, you have to revise and things like that. I don't want to say it's not like about gaming the system, but I feel like it's, with Amazon, it's more just about learning the different intricacies of, hey, like what's kosher and what's not, like we found, even lately for one client, they're like a book publisher. And so, in a product image, we put like free access to the mobile app. And, we tried putting the same thing in their A+ content and it got rejected. And so it's just very interesting and very nuanced to see kind of, what is more strict on approvals, what's not, and the rules on Amazon honestly it's like Google, they do change all the time. So I think just, honestly, like it's not glamorous, but I think that, just, in our life working with Amazon and other third parties, a lot of our time is spent dealing with support, but that's also where I feel like learn the most about the platform as well.
Sorry, I'm looking up because it's bothering me. The name, Aaron Atchison. Yes. So I spoke at Found, and I can't believe I didn't remember that. I spoke at Found conference a couple months ago, and she was the person kind of behind that conference, and she's really big with women in digital. So Aaron Atchison, definitely another name to know if you're interested in getting into women in digital. Sorry. That was going to drive me crazy. Tools. I guess what's in your tool belt? What tools are you using these days?
That's a great question. And honestly, this might sound like a lame answer, but I really think that transitioning over to a smaller agency with, pretty defined roles has been huge, just in terms of my coworkers, I feel like, are my toolbox. If that probably sounds really corny, but we have our advertising team, technical team, creative team. I'm on a team of strategists. We have our co-founders who they had actually started an Amazon offering at another Cleveland agency, and then kind of brought it out to be, and grew it into marketplace strategy. But so we kind of have like them as our gurus, but all the rest of us, I feel like, are little subject matter experts in lots of different things, from things like getting brand registered on Amazon to doing things like seller fulfilled Prime, or stuff like that. So for me, my toolbox is just knowing like, oh hey, so my coworker Dan's had a lot of experience with launching international accounts in like Europe and Australia. My client's interested in doing an Asia account, or something like that. Like, cool, I'm going to go talk to him because I know that he can at least point me in the right direction, and that'll save me time like digging through hours of blogs or dealing with Amazon support or things like that. So that probably sounds kind of lame, but honestly, I think just that. And at the end of the day, like we were talking about earlier, if you don't know the answer to something, Googling it's always an option. I will say that this, unfortunately, since there are less people who are doing Amazon SEO, sometimes fails me, whereas at my previous gig was able to find answers I would feel like 99% of the time. But a lot of times now I feel like just with things changing so rapidly, it's a little bit more of a guessing game, and I can't always necessarily get answers that I need or I'm looking for. But we have a really collaborative team, and everyone's always really happy to help me, get to the solution I need to, and just kind of use each other as, boomerangs and bounce knowledge off each other all the time.
Are there any tools that are just developed specifically for marketplaces in Amazon that you guys use internally that are only for that and not for regular SEO?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a ton. Unfortunately, I'm like blanking right now. I will say, so we have a proprietary tool called MPS Insights. A lot of other Amazon or other third-party specific agencies have those as well. So I would say that like if an Amazon agency is trying to sell you on their technology, they're likely selling you on their own technology. But there are a lot of third-party tools.
Best advice for somebody getting into the industry, whether it be just regular SEO or Amazon SEO?
Oh yeah, great question. I think just, kind of like I had said, I think just, when I started out, you kind of just feel like you're hot shit and you're like, oh cool, I have this awesome job, I'm doing digital marketing and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, like you don't know everything and you're not invincible. And, it definitely really, I feel like pays to just sign up for a few things like Think with Google, or stuff like that, just to kind of keep yourself fresh and be getting that in your inbox every single day, even if you're not necessarily always like in depth reading all the articles, just skimming the headlines, even and diving back in later when you can. If you're more into podcasts, obviously there's Jake's podcast, there's a ton of other podcasts, kind of that you can listen to as well, like even while you're working. And so I think just kind of just staying on top of that industry news and making sure as well that you're not only sharing that internally, but that you're sharing that with your clients, because sometimes I think that the things that seem obvious to us are not obvious to our clients. Like I had one instance where I'd been working with a client for probably like a year, and I mentioned the term SERP, which to us is like super basic. And like the head digital guy at the very large company was like, oh, what's a SERP? Had no idea. We'd gone over this, mentioned this probably hundreds of times, over the course of a year. And all of a sudden this question just comes out, and so I think just kind of taking that step back and realizing like, okay, we're heads down in this every single day. These other people might not be, or even if they do, have a digital background, they might not still be really working within the digital field that much anymore. They need a refresher. They need us to just come to them with whatever's most relevant and make sure that instead of just using our typical lingo, that we're like really fully explaining things to them, because they might not be catching on the way that we think they are.
It's funny that you say that. I had a discussion with somebody a couple of weeks ago where we were talking about like challenges that they had run into in their career. And one of those challenges was that they had run into a bit of trouble with a client because they were often talking kind of in the lingo and the jargon that we use within the industry, and the client didn't understand it. And that became kind of a real barrier to the relationship. And they asked him to be off the account so that they could get somebody else on the account that would be willing to be more educational, or that didn't speak in some of those acronyms and so on and so forth. The other thing that you brought up is right when you start out, right, you certainly have a lot to, there's the cat again, you have a lot to learn. I always tell people to be a sponge, but one of the things you brought up several times was feeling intimidated that people above you know everything and have all the answers. And I can tell you that is definitely not the case. It's okay to Google things. Often honestly, the way that I learn things myself is to Google and dive in. And I know that I don't have all the answers, and especially now that I feel like my life is super, super busy. I feel like I have less and less time to dive in. But the other thing that I've found, kind of the flip side of that, is that there have been times where I have looked up to certain people and held them in really high regard. And it's not to say that you should think everybody above you is not smart, or not as smart as you, or you shouldn't even think that they're smarter than you. But these people were in very high positions in the workplace, so I kind of just assumed that I was going to be able to go to them and they would be able to answer my question. And there were a few times where I was let down by that, where a couple of people that have, I would say, pretty well known in the industry, not great reputations in places that they've actually worked, but really well known. I would guess I'd call it kind of the speaking circuit. And I went to them with what I thought was a basic question. They'll know that for sure. Deer in the headlights look. And it was really kind of an eye opener for me to not just assume that somebody, because they're a senior director or they're this person who's the president of some really great digital organization, that they'll have all the answers, right? Even the great so-and-so didn't have all the answers. And sometimes those people aren't great when it comes to actually working on clients, right? It's probably like the difference between a theoretical physicist and an actual engineer when it comes time to actually do the work. Sometimes those types of people can struggle even if they are a big name. So don't let yourself feel down or allow those people to make you feel intimidated. There are times when you are just as knowledgeable, if not more so than those types of people. But then also don't just assume everybody's, especially when you're starting out, don't assume everybody's dumber than you. Never do that either. So it's really trying to, I guess, find a balance in the middle. And you certainly will find that there are some people above you that absolutely know more, and that there are some people below you that know more than you think. So very interesting.
I agree. And I think, something that I ran into too is almost like a theoretical versus actual like implementation type problem. Like I think, like you were saying, people that I felt that ones who maybe would speak at conferences more, who are more well known, in terms of actually like working on an account with them, it was like pulling teeth. Even just to sometimes get a simple thing of like, I remember asking like, hey, like what would your tips be for someone who's never presented at a conference before? And it took me like 3 months to get a Word document with like 10 little tips on it from, and it's like, isn't this something that you should be able to write out in your sleep kind of thing? Like it's not even like SEO related or like a hard technical question or anything like that. But along those lines as well, I think just one other piece of advice that I would offer to anyone who's kind of starting out in their career is just that, if you do find someone, whether it's someone who's on an account with you or someone that maybe there's like a leadership program you get paired up with, But even if not, and even if they're outside your discipline, maybe they're in like tech, creative, something like that. If there's someone that you respect and that, you know, you kind of jive with, like ask that person for a little bit of your time. Most people love talking about themselves. And I've found that most senior people love talking and kind of trying to help people who are, you know, not at the level that they're at, and kind of just, it's always good to get a different perspective. So I think whether that person is inside or outside of your discipline, that would definitely be something I would hugely recommend.
Absolutely. So time to move into the last segment, time to get made into the Page Two podcast family. So what is a personal fact that most people don't know about you?
That is a great question. Well, I was going to say my cat Gatsby, but I guess everyone at this point probably is pretty aware of it. Oh man, that's a really good question. What is a fact that most people don't know about me? Trying to think. So I just am one of those people who like loves traveling. I feel like I could just go anywhere all the time. Like there's so many places that I wish I could go that are like unsafe or whatever, but you know, definitely love traveling domestically. I've done Europe, Asia, really want to go to Australia, New Zealand, South Pacific. Honestly, like basically you could send me anywhere and I would just be thrilled. So but one of my like random bucket list items is I would really love to at some point just take a road trip, kind of just whole Route 66, do the whole thing from beginning to end. So that's something I've never done. Something else that's like also a really random interest, and especially with the crazy weather that we had yesterday, is I'm weirdly obsessed with like severe weather and tornadoes. When I was a kid, really? I like loved like they scared me, but I like loved like really intense thunderstorms or tornado warnings or things like that. Thought about being a meteorologist for like a hot second, but like math, science aren't really my forte. But like love the movie Twister. Would love to do a storm chasing trip at some point, which are unfortunately very expensive, like a few $1,000s, but definitely think it would be a cool experience. So that's kind of my little nerd fact.
Storm chaser. That would be pretty fun to just go out to like Kansas and drive. Well, I don't know if they drive around like if I feel like I've seen shows where some people drive around in like tanks almost, but then other shows like if Twister is to be believed, it's somebody in their like Dodge Ram just driving around. Maybe that's more realistic, chasing down these storms and getting them on camera. No, I feel like I always find that if I ever see like storm chaser shows on TV, it's one of the TV shows that and like ghost stories I find that I always stop on, or mob movies, as anybody knows, especially my wife. Anytime The Godfather's on, I'm just like, all right, that's what I'm doing.
I mean, it's a classic. There goes 3 hours of your life.
Right. So
but it's worth it.
It is. Desert Island movies. So you're familiar with The Office, right?
Yes.
And specifically the episode of The Office where Ryan starts the fire and they have to go outside and they're playing Desert Island movies, right? So the 5 movies, and it can be shows, I guess, but the 5 programs, I'll call them, that if you were stuck on a desert island and you could only watch 5 programs, movies, shows, or whatever, what would that be?
That's a great question. So definitely would have to say Twister, just because, storm chasing. Twister. Yeah, love Twister. I also love Groundhog Day. Weirdly, like, I don't know, my dad and I like love that movie. We would watch it all the time. In terms of shows, I think Parks and Rec is hilarious. I could watch that like all day, any day. Mean Girls, I would have to say, is definitely a classic. And then I also love kind of like the old school like Saturday Night Live cast, so I'd probably have to say Blues Brothers 2, just because I think that movie is phenomenal.
Blues Brothers number 2, okay.
No, not number 2. Well, number 2 is not bad, but like I meant 2, like.
Oh, TOO. So is Twister your favorite movie then?
Favorite movie out of all of them?
Yeah. It seems like that's like the only movie you mentioned just about.
Which one? Wait, which one? Twister?
Yeah, you said Twister was like that was the first thing out of your mouth with Desert.
I do love that movie. It's just one of those ones, it's so quotable, and I feel like I could just watch it all the time. I don't know. I don't really know if I could even pick a favorite, though. Wow. That's so tough. But
I would not have expected Twister to come out of your mouth. Okay. That's weird. Bill Paxton, Helen Hunt. Yeah, great movie. There, you know, it's gosh, who is the other guy he's got like a minor role? Philip Seymour. Is it Philip Seymour Hoffman?
Philip Seymour Hoffman. Him and Bill Paxton are both dead now.
Dead. Rip. Yeah. Yep.
I know.
Yeah, and speaking of Philip Seymour Hoffman, I watch, so anytime the Hunger Games comes on, that's another, and like, I feel like I think my wife thinks that I just like pure misery, but all the shows that I watch are just like pure misery, or I guess like the Hunger Games, I feel like is a great series of movies. He's in that. I think he plays an awesome role, but that was right before he passed away. Mm-hmm. So always watch that when it comes on. Philip Seymour Hoffman, good actor.
I agree. Yeah, I'm really big into like the sci-fi fantasy stuff too, like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Yeah, all that. Hunger Games. I loved I didn't really love the movies as much, but the His Dark Materials series I was obsessed with. Like just all that kind of stuff I'm all about.
So Harry Potter. One fun fact is I just bought a Gryffindor Quidditch shirt. And I specifically asked for it, and my wife makes fun of me because when Harry Potter comes on, another show that I have to watch, and I'm like, yep, I'm a 36-year-old man. That's right, Harry Potter Quidditch. Well,
and you could have literally watched it like the day before, but if it's on again, you still have to watch it.
Yeah, and Freeform has Harry Potter on all the time, and now USA also just. I don't know, like what it is about Harry. I mean, it must draw audiences because I feel like every other month, either Freeform or USA has a giant Harry Potter marathon, and it's just awesome.
I agree. Yeah, Harry Potter's definitely an addiction. I'm a huge fan.
and speaking of sci-fi, the other one that's coming up in April that I don't even know like how it managed to happen, but my wife has become addicted to Game of Thrones. And it's coming up in April. Like we just over break binge watched seasons 3 through, I believe it's 8.
Oh boy!
7 Game of Thrones. Binge watched every episode, and she was leading the charge on binge watching it. So I'm excited for that to come up here in April.
Were you like an OG fan of that?
Oh yeah. Okay. So like Game of Thrones and Walking Dead, they actually. Honestly, they both started pretty close to the time when I got into SEO. I remember being at like my original agency when those shows started. Mm-hmm. And I was an OG with both of those shows. First episode, first season, like
wow.
I was like, yep, I'm on board for the whole ride. And even though Walking Dead's gone downhill quite a bit, but I've been on board for the entire ride. And that's saying something because I don't really watch many shows. So like if you're in my lineup, that's not saying anything about the quality of the show, but it's something at least for me because I just don't pick many shows.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, I need to get on the Game of Thrones train. My brother is like obsessed, and my mom's seen it all too. And they're like, "What are you doing? You like don't have much time." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll try to catch up." But I need to watch that. I've never seen Walking Dead. Another one that I'm like hopelessly addicted to is even when the seasons aren't that good is American Horror Story. I don't know what it is, but I've like gotta watch it.
My brother's way into that. So last couple of questions. Music. What's on your music app right now?
Honestly, everything. Listen to a lot of Spotify at work, so they kind of curate a lot of those like Discover Weekly playlists or like Release Radar, so that kind of stuff is great. I would say I'm a huge alternative fan, so anything like, Panic at the Disco, Fall Out Boy, The Maine, like all that kind of stuff, like stuff I was listening to in like middle school and high school, I'm still listening to, so, love them, but definitely pretty broad interest. Like I like country and oldies and classic rock and just honestly all kinds of stuff. So I'm like, my playlists are pretty eclectic and they're kind of all over the place. So there could be anything from like some like acoustic cover of like a 60s song to like something that's not like screamo, but like a little bit all over the board. So
just wait until 10 years from now when either you or your kids are calling Panic at the Disco classic rock or classic music. I remember the time when I was a kid at the time, and my dad just laughed at me when I said, "Dad, I love Metallica. They're a classic rock band." And he just like looked at me and like, "Kid, you got no idea what you're talking about." And and I find that like the music that I listened to in college for me is like taking me way back. Like anytime like a Green Day or some rap song comes on that I listened to in college, no matter where I'm at, it's like, all right, time to break it down, know all the words for whatever reason, even though I'm a middle-aged white suburban male that has no business singing or rapping or doing anything like that.
That was one question that I always have is like, how does the human brain like forget what you eat like 20 minutes ago, but it remembers songs that you haven't heard in like 20 years? Like I will literally never understand that.
I honestly forget things all the time. Like I'll set my keys down or my wallet down, can't find them. But when like, and I hate to say this now because of the person, but like Remix to Ignition comes on.
I just watched that was a show I just watched, that whole R. Kelly special.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So anyways.
It's so catchy.
It is. Last question, last meal.
Oh, that's
you're going to the electric chair. You can eat one meal. What is it?
Yeah, I'm kind of like one of those expensive date people, so I'd probably have to pick something pretty fancy, like steak or lobster or whatever. Definitely like the garlic mashed potatoes, probably some asparagus, all that good stuff, and then probably ending with like ice cream and a cookie, because those are my favorite desserts. Probably Mitchell's ice cream.
So I joke with my wife, and she knows this about herself, that she, no matter what, gravitates towards the expensive items on the menu, right? So I always joke, like, we could take all the prices off of everything and go in, and you would pick instinctively the most expensive thing. Or we could like put a blindfold on you and just tell you like, move your finger around the menu, and she would land on the most expensive thing. So she also is an expensive date.
It's a problem.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, thank you for your time. Where can my audience find you?
Yeah, great question. So I would say definitely please feel free to reach out to me and add me on LinkedIn. You can also add me on Twitter as well. So that's at GalyshJM. Definitely not always work related on there though. So if you want professional updates, I would say go for LinkedIn. If you want a little more personal, feel free to go for Twitter. So
can you spell your last name? Because I almost always get it wrong. I always put the Y before the L when the L goes before the Y. Yep, that's correct. So it's the @ symbol, of course, and then GALYSHJM. There you go. Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for staying on so late, and thank you for being so candid. You are very welcome. Awesome.